I'm Erin Trenbeth Murray, and I'm leading today's group discussion celebrating Black History Month, which is designed to recognize and commend all Black Americans that have contributed to the fabric of the United States. The origins of Black History Month date back to 1926, when Dr. G. Woodson, a noted Black scholar, set aside 1 week in February to recognize the heritage, achievements, and contributions of African Americans. From the beginning, the intent was to encourage and coordinate teaching of history of Black Americans in the nation's public schools. Black History Month was first proposed by Black United students at Kent State University in 1969, and the first celebration took place 1 year later in 1970 at Kent State University. 6 years later, President Gerald Ford recognized Black History Month in 1976. He urged Americans to seize the opportunities to honor the all too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout history. Today, I am meeting with members of Women Who Succeed to discuss dreams, challenges, opportunities, and perspectives about the future for Black Americans. Ladies, thank you for being here today for this very important discussion. I'd like to begin by having you just share your name and a sentence or two about yourself, and we'll start in the back with Sui Lang.
Thank you so much, Erin, for the opportunity to join this conversation. My name is Sui Lang Panoke. I currently serve as the Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion for Zions Bank, and I live, eat, and breathe this stuff. Super thrilled to dive into this conversation.
And I'm Jennifer Bean. I'm Director of Fundraising here at Success in Education, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know many women as we build our network.
I'm Alyssha Dairsow Garfield, and I am just happy to be here. I am the founder and executive director of Curly Me. It's a nonprofit organization that services Black girls in our community.
I'm Kassandra Cruz, and I'm glad to be here to listen to all these amazing ladies.
I'm Michelle Loveday. I'm an educator and founder of Loveday Educational Consulting and Rise Virtual Academy, which is an academy for Black students to learn their Black history. So this is a perfect topic to be talking about today.
Absolutely.
I'm Isom. I'm a community and business leader and candidate for the United States Senate.
Thank you, ladies, so much for being here today to have this conversation. We're going to just start out with the basic understanding of your perspectives. Black History Month is designed, as I mentioned, to celebrate the heritage, achievements, and contributions of African Americans. Tell me why this is important to you.
I'll start. For me, I think and I know, Black history is something that's 365. It's every day during the year. And I'm also aware as an educator that we can't fit everything into the curriculum. And so there are ways that we can insert and promote the history and the contributions that Black Americans have put forth. And not only in this country, but all over the world. And I think it's just important that people take a moment to pause and look at all of the inventions that have happened because of Black people. I think our country wouldn't be functioning the way it does if we didn't look at the unification of that. So I think just pausing to reflect and look at the history that is given beyond civil rights is one to be celebrated.
I'll share my thoughts. I think it's important because their story is our story. Mm-hmm. It's part of who we all are. It's part of the fabric of our country and our priorities and the things we care most about. And I don't know how you disregard those elements of freedom and acknowledgement of speaking up when things aren't right. I don't know how you ignore any of that and not celebrate it.
I'll add to that, Allie. I'm so happy to be here because I want to learn. I want to remain curious. And I'll let you in on a personal note. My kids have challenged me as the generation a little bit closer to this to not just share my beliefs, but also provide action. And that's what I think learning and curiosity can do for me. And so I'm happy to learn from everyone here today.
The reason I love and just to talk about Black History Month and its importance is because my father was a part of how we bonded. So it's a personal thing for me as well, over history. American history from all aspects of life. And when we talk about even the military contributions that Black Americans have given to this country, they don't mention it a lot, but it's very much there, and it's very much in the fabric of who we are as a people, as a country. So I just love to be able to talk about our history, which is American history, which shouldn't be defined just by a month, but the month is so important because sometimes when you're in isolated places, you don't get any other interaction or perspective. So I think having the month can be a catalyst to action, other action steps.
That's great point.
Alyssha, to that point, is there a specific individual for any of you that inspires you from history that for their contributions to Black history and to American history?
So I'll share my top 4.
I love that you come with 4.
Nelson Mandela, Bob Marley, Jay-Z, and Dave Chappelle. I am totally with Michelle on this is not just a thing that we do in February, but 365 days of the year. Last thing I want to note, Michelle can totally endorse this, and probably everybody here. A book that I would encourage everyone to read is Stamped the Remix by Ibram X. Kendi, who retells the story of America's story, 400 years, through the lens of race. And I feel like I never really fully understood Black history and American history until I read that book.
But he says it's not a book on history.
True. It's a play on words, but it's really a conversation, I think, and integrates all the cultural nuances, social, cultural, racial, economic, political, in one resource.
Wonderful. Beyond my family, when I look at someone that inspires and moves and breathes and does, I would have to say Oprah. She's definitely on my top list of like, she's my aunt and she doesn't know it, but she empowers everyone. She empowers everyone to do their best, especially women, and to take a hold of an enterprise and an organization the way that she has, and in such a way that she does it and still stands in her truth each and every day as a Black woman in media and newspaper. I'm just in awe of how she runs it and does schools out in Africa and just works for the community, but also educates with kindness and empathy and love that anyone and everyone can relate to.
So to the point of, there's some discussion, we've talked about integrating 365 days of the year, which we're definitely going to dive into a little bit more. But specifically during Black History Month, and especially as an educator, and all of you in some regard are an educator, whether you're educating employees or the public or the women you mentor, the young women you mentor, or in a school setting, what can people do to stop for a moment during Black History Month and recognize all the contributions that Black Americans have done for our country?
For me, just in general, I try to like understand like what's going on, kind of like Jennifer, just stay curious and just listen and understand. So that's like the way that I do my everyday when I meet someone different or just see something different. Because I grew up in a very rural town in Utah, so I was the only diversity growing up. So when I finally moved to the city and got to like explore my diversity and like understand more and meeting more people of leaders that are in Black history and everything, it's just I just stay curious and learn, and I feel like that's the way that I do it.
I think the suggestion to read writings of Black authors and learning their stories. And when you study one person, there's always a chain of stories that are connected together. And I think we have to expose ourselves to different narratives told in different ways with different voices and different lived experiences in different eras. And when you ask the question about name somebody who stands up, I'm sitting here thinking of like 10 names I could share of different eras in history, right? And because they all built on one another. And I, as a young girl, was taught about Harriet Tubman, and then
that's who I was going to say too,
yes,
right?
But then you start to dive deeper, and you realize there's so many other stories that even predate her that build on it, and together this narrative is beautiful, and we should be celebrating it. So, I think if you haven't had exposure, you just start by reading personal narratives of those who have a different lived experience than you have.
So being open-minded and being curious, readings, specifically Black authors and history of Black Americans. What else can we do to stop for a moment and provide more perspective and introspection during the month of Black History Month.
There's so many events that are going on within many towns, especially in Utah. There's just so many. I don't know what it will look like, of course, because of COVID, but there's also virtual offerings. And so I think as we are looking around for what to do, just go on, the Black Chamber of Commerce's website, NAACP, Ogden End and Salt Lake End, and just kind of reach out and look, because there's going to be quite a few Facebook events that are going to be public to attend, whether it's virtual or in person, even as something small as, supporting the Freedom Banquet and learning and meeting new people. So I think that would be like the easiest thing. And if you don't know where to go, I mean, literally Google is the best friend that ever could be. Black History events in Salt Lake. So there's how you
The library is also a great, not organization, but a great place to start, because every library has a setup. Every bookstore usually has a setup during Black History Month. And I mean, also YouTube. If you're interested in inventions, you can just keywords, just like when you're looking for something for your kid or for, your spouse on Amazon. You use keywords if you can't think of the name. I want a bedazzler, but I don't know if is it bedazzler or is it rhinestone? I don't know. So you just start typing in words and things pop up. And so it's just like, I tell people, you want to know who invented the ironing board? Type in who invented the ironing board. You want to know who created the Nerf gun? Type in who created the Nerf gun. If you want to know how Swanson got their freezer trucks, who created that? Surprisingly enough, it was a Black person. So just typing in words.
Or not surprisingly, right?
Yes. True. Good call.
That part, right? So I really think that just using your brain, using your mind to say, hey, I want to do something, and then actually following through on that will definitely help.
Love the library idea. And if you don't have a library, I have a library. Come to my home. I will
we
open
pay
my library
taxes.
to you.
We pay taxes for a library. I am a big component of city
But I have a private library with lots of books
Yeah.
from Black history in it. Also want to encourage people to get to know people in your community. There's so many people, Black leaders in Salt Lake County and across the state who are making history today.
Yes.
So not just reading, but things that have happened decades, centuries ago, but things are happening right now, today in our communities that Black leaders have made valuable contributions to business, to politics, to government. I mean, you name it.
I love that also with that leads me to the thought of supporting Black business-owned businesses or entrepreneurs, certainly 365 days a year, but being intentional and deliberate, having it, as Cassie said, at the forefront of my mind, thinking about events, how I'm going to educate my children further. The exposure, the library is the perfect free way to do that. So I think those are all fantastic ideas for all of us in Women Who Succeed to stop and take a moment to reflect. I want to go back to the 365 days a year because I stumbled across, I'd heard of it, but then I read the full script of the conversation between Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes. And I wanted your thoughts. It was with Mike Wallace and Morgan Freeman. And Mike Wallace is discussing with Morgan Freeman why he believes 1 month should not be delegated to Black history. And Morgan Freeman says, because Black history is happening every day and it is American history. Mike Wallace pushed back and said, how are we going to end racism without it? To which Morgan Freeman replied, stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man. I'm going to ask that you stop calling me a Black man. I know you as Mike Wallace and you know me as Morgan Freeman. I'm not going to say, hey, I know this white guy, Mike Wallace. Hear what I'm saying? So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that perspective, on all of those perspectives, actually.
It's funny when you interpret something. And from that interview, it was really interesting to hear people's interpretations of what Morgan Freeman was saying and what he was actually saying as what I heard as a Black woman. What people say that they heard was he doesn't want anyone to see color. And he just wants everyone to stand and let's be colorblind. which is a dangerous construct in itself, because if that's the case, we miss the beauty of the trees and the grass and the sky if we have that visual capability. That's what they wanted to hear, because that's what's safe and that's what's easy. And it's hard to acknowledge. What he was saying was, we have to stop putting each other in boxes when it comes to life outside of this. Even before the recording, I'm talking about my mothering and work and what we're balancing. And so what he's saying is, get to know someone outside of the box you've put them in, because nothing significant can come without a relationship. So let's stop identifying and saying that, because you're gonna meet white men and white women and black men and black women. But for a moment, just put them aside and say, I met another human. And these are the things that we have in common and are interested in. And then you can go beyond the cultural things, because he's saying Black history should be 365 because it's interwoven, like we've been saying. It's something that we are part of all the time. And so for me, it was like, yeah, Morgan Freeman did make a profound statement, but not in the area of him saying, ignore my color, because that's not who I am. This is the same Morgan Freeman that asked, how far have we come from the Declaration of Independence, and how ironic it is as a Black man that I'm reading this. So we have to look at the nuances of who Morgan Freeman is, and he recognizes that. In that small part of the interview, it was just so you can say, see me as a human. Yeah. See me as the same thing. I want the best for my family. I want that same dollar you have so that I can grow my family's legacy. I want to be able to reach out in that way.
Can I ask a question, though, to follow up on that? Because it's one thing to create that empathy, right, and understanding, but how do you create the change without the conversation? So how do we have the conversation about the need for change even after we have empathy, right? And so if we don't pause every once in a while and say, who are we and what are we doing about these differences that we want to work through and understand, there's value in the conversation, right? How do we have those conversations without...
You have to have those crucial conversations.
Yeah. There's no movement, no growth, no anything without the conversation.
And so moving it forward, I think that's where the relationship starts, because once you get over the fear is what he's saying. Because there's fear, and you look at your trusted 10 circle of who you hang out with the majority of the time, they look like you, they act like you, they're same political views, same education.
It's a natural human tendency.
So if we go outside of that fear and then establish a relationship beyond, then the conversation comes. It's like you're on the ground training, hands-on, because you're interacting daily.
Well, and it's deeper than just a conversation. It's the type of conversations that we're having. Do we feel comfortable and confident and safe giving it to me straight, keeping it real, asking the hard questions, right? And not having that fear of offending or being overly sensitive, or however people want to describe it. Right. I think what Morgan Freeman was describing is, see my color. See my color, embrace it, and don't judge me for it.
Don't define me by it.
Don't define me by it, but question yourself, ask yourself, how do you perceive me because of it? That's the question. And that's the work that we all need to do internally to move the needle on racism in America.
But it's an ongoing thing, right? It's not just a month. And I think that's what we all kind of have that sense of. Yeah. It has to be an immersive experience and dialogue in an ongoing way.
Beyond the things that make you feel safe, beyond the civil rights movement, because there's so much more to be for beyond that. And the push of recognizing that, right? And pushing back when there's something that comes up that makes you feel uncomfortable. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. Because there's truth that I know that I grew up with that you may not realize, but when I make that statement, it might hit you a little differently, but sit with it. And then look at it from, that's my perspective, And she would have a different perspective. She grew up rural as another woman of color in a small town. She's going to come completely different to the conversation.
Well, to that point, as we just touched on racism, which affects all of us in some aspect of our lives. It affects our personal and professional lives, our community, affects us socially, economically. How do you believe we can counter racism on a day-to-day basis? What does that look like in your actions, in your words, in your thoughts, in your essence on a day-to-day basis.
Sometimes those three don't align: actions, thoughts, and words.
Yeah, right. And that's the challenge. I guess the first thing that comes to mind, Erin, is that it needs to be a personal commitment, something that's extremely intentional and meant to maybe not initiate change from that first conversation, but in the attempt to understand and learn. And like for me, sit here today on Black History Month as a white woman and be brave enough to listen and lean in and say, this is my perspective. Am I saying it right? Is that offensive? Ask the question in a circle where you know there's compassion and empathy to receive your answer so that you can be seen and heard. And I think when you're seen and heard, you're willing to do that for other people. And I think that's the momentum that will maybe perpetuate that change that we're looking for. But I do think that on a daily basis, it takes a commitment, a personal commitment to do this all the time. And I think that also is the challenge to live in that way, not just be that, this month, but to live in that way.
Love that so much.
That takes commitment. Yeah.
Yeah. I oftentimes describe the work that many of us do, and we're all doing here today, as being in the business of opening hearts and strengthening minds. And for me, doing this professionally, one of the most effective ways you can do that is 3 words: exposure, exposure, exposure. The more we are exposed to different personalities, different leadership styles, different cultural norms and nuances, the more tolerant we are.
Sure.
The less like, oh my gosh, that's so weird and different. It becomes normalized in a way where you're more likely to embrace it and be curious and intrigued to learn more.
Right.
Instead of shutting away from
that
it.
Wall.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
The fear.
The fear comes down, and then you can begin to be that vulnerable self because you're not afraid of what the response is going to be. And I think that's really important.
There's a basic principle about experiences change mindsets. So when we intentionally seek experiences, we can change hearts and minds. And I think that's
kind of what we're
more
saying.
of what we need to commit ourselves to, is proactively seeking experiences that expose us to different ideas.
And it's one that cannot be done alone. Like it can't be on the shoulders of a Black person.
No.
To always be the one to speak out. And I think, when we look at who was walking across the Petmus Bridge with Dr. Martin Luther King, it was multiple people from multiple races, from multiple genders. It can't lay on the shoulders of, well, it's something that would bother you more, so you speak up about it. No, we're tired. There's trauma behind it. And we shouldn't have to talk about
the
it.
entire burden.
And we shouldn't have to carry the entire burden. But when it's shared and people speak up at the table, if I didn't speak, they would speak for me and say, well, I don't know if that's true. If they see something wrong in a meeting, they speak out about it. It's a shared responsibility. And it's hard because, even Dr. King said, I'd rather, it's harder to sit among my enemies than the silence of my friends, to, paraphrase his speech. And so it's like when you sit silent and allow it to happen and kind of brush it aside, it's pervasive there. Those microaggressions are huge. And so in a daily world where there's constant racism and bigotry and the hate that goes on, it kind of catches you as, are they serious right now? Like, are we really going back here? Is this really happening? It has to be challenged. And it has to be looked at. Like, what am I doing with my power and privilege?
Right. And having the courage, you have to have the courage. So when you see that something is happening to your sister, you have to actually open your eyes to some of the struggles that other people experience after you've built the relationship, after you've had some of the conversations. Sometimes it's just nice to be like, okay, I don't have to answer this, because sometimes folks will not hear it from me, but they'll hear it from you, and they'll hear it from you, or you. And so you've done the work. Have confidence in you've done the work. We've had conversations. You've done your own research. Now it's time to put all of that into action and speak up for folks that may not be heard in the same way.
Sure.
It's a responsibility we all have.
That is your civic responsibility.
It's a human responsibility.
Yeah.
And the messenger matters.
To open the door, to get in the door. Like one woman, we are all opening the doors for some of the girls that are coming up behind us.
Right.
Women running for politics, education, working in business, working in education at a high level and for nonprofits and things like that. So that young girls can come up and they don't have to carry the same burdens that we may have carried because we all have to have those conversations, talk to our children to make sure that they don't make the same mistakes as maybe we have or our ancestors have. So
I think the call I feel is to no longer be a bystander. It's not good enough to say, well, this is what I feel and this is how I respond because of that. But I will stand up now and take action and let my belief and my thought be known, even if it is scary and uncomfortable. So like I said earlier when we opened, my challenge personally is to no longer be a bystander and to use my voice for the action I know I can take.
Yeah. I always say, being a bystander or being an ally is one thing. But in a harder term for people to understand, are you going to be the accomplice?
oh boy,
Oh yeah, that's great.
Are you going to be the accomplice in disrupting everything that has ever happened and questioning when you see something on social media that's been shared multiple times? That doesn't seem right. Why would they want to teach that? Are they really teaching that? Let's question that and go to the source. So. Be an accomplice.
Yeah, and extend each other grace, though, in the whole dialogue, right? Because words have different meaning for different people based on their experiences. So we have to be really open to forgiveness and understanding and compassion.
I'm telling you, Black history, Black people have been given a lot of grace.
Hold on now.
We give a lot of grace. I hear you.
a whole bunch of grace
all the time.
We say grace. My God.
Amen to that.
We say it. Yeah.
It'll be given.
Well, in wrapping up for today, I want to go back to Alyssa's comment a little bit and reflect about the future and what are your dreams for children of all races going forward. And that's where I think we'll conclude today. So I'd love to hear from each of you if that's possible.
Well, I like to start off because like sitting here listening to y'all has been like amazing because in my family, I'm like the first generation student. I'm the one who first got her education and everything. I have like tons of younger cousins. So even after this, like I'm going to go tell them like, oh my gosh, like guess where I got to be? Like I got to be part of this amazing panel. Right. So I guess for me, it's like I always teach my cousins and my little brother is to like just be more understanding of the people you meet because you never know what's their story. Like it's so easy to judge someone when you first meet them, but you never really know like what did they deal with? Like what's their history? Where do they come from? What's their family and everything? Yeah. So I know that's something I really want all the future children to do and like something that I teach to my cousins and my siblings is that just be more understanding to everybody you meet.
Yeah. I think as we are in this month and we're working with legislators, I would think and know that ethnic studies needs to be in every building, every school to be given because there is so much history and so many different perspectives. And so that is a dream that I hope is a soon to be reality this year.
My dream looking forward is that no child, regardless of race, feels encumbered by the history we share. Yeah. That every child feels there's an opportunity that's unlimited and bright before them. Regardless of what has happened in the past, I hope every child seizes the moment and sees the potential.
I'm in agreement with what everyone else has already shared, that every young girl will see themselves as a leader, as a valuable contributor to whatever community they are growing up in, that they are loved, they are supported, and there are people who are willing to invest in them.
I wish a lot of things for my kids, and I think, and for kids in general, the generations behind me, I have always instilled in my kids the challenge to celebrate uniqueness. And I hope that diversity becomes something that is cherished and unique about folks instead of maybe putting them in a box or in a category. It becomes something to celebrate and understand about them as a human. And I also hope to use the next generation, my kids, to learn. They don't have yet all of the trauma and the legacy that that has been brought up with our generation. And I think that's refreshing to me to see that they are forming their opinions and their thoughts and their perspectives based on their world. And I want them to continue to do that.
And I hope the generations after us understand that they belong in any room that they see themselves in.
Belonging, yes.
They belong there. They can shift the atmosphere of rooms by understanding why they are in the room, the purpose of them being in the room, whether if they're an assistant or they're leading the meeting. There's a reason you're in the room. Be your authentic self. You have a purpose, understanding that you have a purpose. So no matter what your journey has been to get to wherever it is, you belong in the space. And so speak with confidence, speak with courage, speak with passion, and understand the purpose of you being in the room.
Oh, well said. So well said. I love that.
Well, ladies, thank you so very much for your insights today. Thank you for your empathy and grace for one another, for me. Thank you for your leadership of the young women in this community and for speaking up on behalf of so many women and people that need a stronger voice. I'm grateful for that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Erin.
Don't cut, guys. Can we get it?